Welcome to ImprovSophy, where we bring living room discussions to your daily life. This week, we are currently discussing Eros in the book The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. We're your hosts, Jordan and Cory. Enjoy.
All right, the one we're all waiting for, romance.
Sorry, my mind was very distracted. So the one about sex, I'm just going to say it.
All right, he said it. He has broken new territory.
Yeah. Now, of course, the whole thing about sex and purity culture, but that's not the whole thing. That's not a whole topic we're gonna dive into. That's a whole nother issue in and of itself, where one side says one thing, another side says another. One side's being idiotic, and the other side's being way too strict. Is a good way of putting it. But yeah.
Yeah. So C.S. Lewis, what
Yes.
what does he think about this topic that touches every one of us?
As you can tell, I have some strong opinions. I'm very strongly opinionated about things, but at the same time, I don't think I come off as like a dictator when it comes to it. Oh, well, anyways, C.S. Lewis, as you were mentioning.
Yes. It's kind of interesting. I'm also reading Rob Bell's, it's a book called Sex God.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to relate sexuality to spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like reading that at the same time I read the chapter on Eros, which is the Greek word for, what's the Greek word for?
I think passion.
Passion, love. Okay. Yeah, start us off.
Yeah. All right. So I actually did take notes because I figured taking notes is actually a good thing now. But I do them in my own way. Nothing really super structured. Maybe as I do it more, it'll be a better structure. If I can find the page. Starting off. So, middle of the first paragraph in page 120. Okay, yeah. The note that I wrote was, Eros is something that can take over one as if though being conquered.
Have you experienced this?
No, well, it depends on the type of Eros. So I made a note later on
awkward.
as it's only awkward if you make it awkward.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, as long as you don't make eye contact, you're fine. But with this whole thing, the way I understand Eros is the way, at least in the way C.S. Lewis was putting it, sexual desire does not always equal Eros, but Eros does include sexual desire. Actually, starting off with just a broad overview from what I understood, I liked, at least in the way I understood it, the way C.S. Lewis was putting Eros and sexual desire. Sexual desire in and of itself is just desire without love, while Eros is sexual desire with love, and having a proper Eros is fulfilling that desire properly. Yeah.
Sexual desire without Eros is like any other desire. Sexual desire with Eros becomes about the beloved.
Mm-hmm.
Just paraphrasing him, but yeah, like sexual desire without Eros, it's just like being hungry. It's just a base instinct, like want.
Mm-hmm.
But when properly integrated, it's really concerned about the beloved.
Yeah, because I noticed this is a personal matter for me, but I don't mind talking about it. My last relationship, I don't think my ex really understood that. It's just more of sex as pleasure rather than trying to have it as intimacy. I wanted the intimacy part, but, well, I'm not going to go too much into who she was, how she processed everything and whatnot. But hers was, well, we'll just get this done and over with. Like I said, she had her own personal stuff. But I was like, well, I want to enjoy this. I like a lot of the foreplay and all this, but she was so focused on other things. Being vague for a reason because I don't want to get too much into the topic because I don't want to get too far off from the topic. But relating that to this, it's let's say you get married or I get married in sometime in the future. Don't don't come to your wife as if though she's somebody who's trying to just simply gratify you. Rather, have a mutual understanding of I wish to gratify her, and in return, her gratify me. That I think is a good understanding of Eros, of a proper sexual desire.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a touchy subject.
As you can tell, I have no qualms with talking about it. I know within the Christian community, some people are like, "Oh, we don't really talk too much about it. We kind of do, but we kind of don't." Me, I'm all upfront with, yeah, let's talk about this sort of thing. Let's parse out these issues.
Yeah, I assume it's more. It's a lot more meaningful if you're making those choices to become one with someone who's like a friend, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That there's that the love is like multi-layered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's something really about that of knowing them, like knowing them in like the
Yeah.
Hebrew sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good connection. Well, I thinking about it now, I should have read Song of Songs or Song of Solomon because that's the romantic nature of it, and could have read Book of Ruth. Ruth would have also been a good tie-in to this with proper mutual love and understanding between Boaz and Ruth and the way they went about things. It's kind of almost like a ancient form of courting for them, but it's
Didn't Ruth just like sleep at Obadiah's like at the bottom of his bed, and then he took her, and then he's like, "Oh shoot, I'm Jewish.
I don't know.
I need to take her as a wife."
It's been a while. It's been
Okay.
It's been a while. I'd have to look at it, and apparently there's some sexual innuendos in the story that they meant back then. I don't know. Sometimes modern scholarship, I don't know if I trust some of the things some modern scholars say because some of them, well, that's neither here nor there right now.
But I thought it was like he did the right thing. It's like, oh, I've slept with this person.
Maybe.
Now there's like this attachment, and I take her under my wing
Yeah,
in
maybe.
a patriarchal society.
Maybe. I don't know. Like I said, I'd have to go back and read it again just as a refresher. But I think best way to do it is, and I think here's a note that I made. Sexual desire without Eros, wanted, yeah, wanted the thing itself. Eros wants the beloved.
Mm.
The way C.S. Lewis kind of wrote that out seems to be a little disconnected in the sentence. It seems like, oh, I am over here. Yes, this is me right here now.
It's like all those AI stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote it down. Let me see. Page 121. Well, I'm trying to find the context. Oh, well, let me see if I can put it in a modern English. So sexual desire without, as we were mentioning before, without Eros, the thing in of itself, the sexual desire, it is something that wants somebody not for their own sake. Let me try to simplify that a little bit more. So it's basically sexual desire without the consideration of somebody else. Sexual desire for its own sake is not proper Eros. I think that's the point of what C.S. Lewis was getting here. And I made a note on that saying it sounds like greed. It's like combining lust with greed.
Um, yeah, in Rob Bell's book, Sex God, which I'm reading at the same time, there's this chapter. Oh gosh, what's it called? I don't remember the chapter name. But basically, he views the instinct of sex as an instinct searching for connection, and that connection is like the universal thing that people seek. That they're all seeking connection with others, which he then relates to the Trinitarian uh, Godhead.
Mm-hmm.
So he views like connection as like the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say, yeah, prostitution, it doesn't actually lead to human connection. Like it's not actually filling up this thing that the instinct is aimed for.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's falling short of a perfect sexual ethic. So it seems like Rob Bell's agreeing with Lewis and kind of parallel words.
I'd have to read the book. It sounds interesting. But yeah, it's not loving another person for their own sake in regards to the bedroom. If it's just, I come here, we do our thing, 5 minutes later we're done, and we just head out. That's sad to me. That's not, as you were mentioning, real meaningful connection. The sexual act should be something that should connect the two people together. It should be able to deepen the intimacy in a greater measure. Because I know there's two chemicals that are released when you have sex. It's, what is it? Serotonin, or it's a bonding chemical of some sort.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I'm no biologist or what have you. But yeah, I think as well, this has been mentioned so many times. And to add on a quote, sexual desire without love lacks Eros. When sexual desire is mixed with love, that is where you find proper Eros. Think about a lot of the hookup culture. That's very common at this point. It has a lack of true intimacy. And I've heard people, they're sleeping with somebody as kind of a sex buddy. And they're like, well, I started to catch feels for this person. Have you ever heard that?
Oh my gosh, it's so toxic.
I hadn't really heard that term before until a few months back, where I was like, oh, that's a thing? Oh, okay.
The wagon is miles ahead of the horse. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, oh, catch feels. And then I was at this party and somebody was like, well, I started to catch feels. And everyone else was like, ooh. I was like, isn't that the point of sex? That in my mind, I didn't say that out loud, but I was like, in my mind, isn't that the point of sex, to greater connect with somebody in that manner?
Yeah, I guess it's like the thing when it comes from a place that's not articulated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we just started fooling around, then ended up at. I'm not even gonna finish that sentence. It's too boring. But I think if you're articulate and you go to someone, and you're directly like, oh, I like you, I'm interested in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And just being very clear about what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you say to someone, I don't know, you approach someone and you're like, hey, I would like to get to know you better.
Yeah.
Like, you should say that and mean that you literally would like to get to know them better. Like, that's, you're approaching them and stating your motivation and then following through on that. It just seems like people should probably communicate generally before they make decisions that are like soul bonding or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the whole idea of just fool around and then it's like, oh wait, I figured out what these biological instincts do. Like, yeah, it just seems more more like fully integrated to go into a decision with strength rather than weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go into the situation, you have all these emotional ties, and it's like it's going to it out of weakness. Like there's not actually like a decision point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's too often, at least probably a lot of people in the culture, they're they're very visually stimulated because of a lot of visual stimulation. They want to um, get that, I guess, touch stimulation. I don't know what words to use for the matter, but I would say, I think people confuse having a relationship and thinking, well, we're in a relationship now. Now we have to have sex right away. Instead of, well, let's get to know each other. Even if let's say, even in a secular sense, a non Christian sense, I think a smart idea would be wait 4 or 5 months before you would even consider getting into bed with somebody.
Yeah, like laying a foundation of affection, then laying a foundation of a friendship, and then laying a foundation of Eros. Like having these properly layered.
Mm-hmm.
It like if it just seems like there have been experiences of me just talking to people where like Eros was just like what they started with, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
like this relationship's actually kind of hollow. It's like playing just the melody on a piano, not having any like bass chords to finish it off.
Yeah.
It's like this is kind of like a cheap facade of a really holistic relationship that increases human connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, well, because I'm recalling from somebody who I've known, not who I have just known as a friend of a friend. They would, this person would want to immediately get physical with other people, and I'm thinking, well, that's not the best way of going about it, because after a while they discovered this person wasn't the best person. They were a complete, total
Mm,
creep kind of person. They were uh, just horrible in many ways, very violent. And it's like you're confusing the idea of sex with a relationship. Because although sex and a relationship do go together, unfortunately, people make those things exclusive, or not exclusive, but they make they twist them together in such a way to where things go way too fast instead of prolonging that gratification, if that makes sense.
yeah, there's definitely like the move very fast and burn out thing. Like,
Mm-hmm. I think a good way.
I think,
Oh, I'll let you go ahead.
but it seems like this is just my own taxonomy, my own
Mm-hmm.
way of categorizing phenomenon. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm way off Lewis here. But one like really one toxic mentality is like bringing a savior complex to a new relationship. Like, oh, this person will be my savior, and then it's kind of going from heartbreak to heartbreak, and
Mm-hmm.
love is just, young adulting is just the wild west of love, and you have to break a lot of hearts to make an omelet, etc., etc. uh, but yeah, there could be this like savior complex of like going from person to person, just putting so much emphasis, like putting so much weight on that platform, and then it just breaks. uh and then there's also like a milder thing, like, yeah, maybe a new relationship, I'm not going to value this new person as like a savior, but maybe they could be part of the healing process
Mm-hmm.
for the ways I've been damaged by past relationships. And I think that's healthy. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is a proper ordering of love, and you do wake up and say your prayers to those people that you made voluntary commitments to, and
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the reality. But if someone's part of the healing process, so be it. That's beautiful and awesome.
Yeah, that is good. Um, To add on to that, it's good to, if somebody does help you with that, it's good. Just make sure it's not the person who will be your end all be all in terms of all healing. Because the question is,
Mm,
what if you're having a bad day with them, and it's like, well, I thought you were this and this. As a matter of fact, you're this absolutely horrible person, but you're just having a bad day. It's good just to have somebody who will help, but is not that end all be all. I think another good question would be how many people confuse love for sex or sex for love, however it is.
it's kind of hard to tell. I don't really like just putting numbers on individuals because I don't know, just these categories don't really work. If you categorize people by a way of thinking and then you talk to an individual, and people are a lot more 3D than the two-dimensional labels.
Mm-hmm.
I think like just generally though, there's kind of this weird thing in Christendom where in church it's like, oh, you better blah blah blah, like
Mm-hmm.
just very like judgmental, and then Hollywood it's just like a free for all.
Yeah.
As far as what you see on TV, and there's really no one really in the middle of that. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like.
Yeah. I think in regards to the church ethic, I think it's good to delay somebody, but I think at the same time, somebody shouldn't be shamed if they do go out and give into that temptation. Let's say once, it's like, oh, I messed up. I'm not going to do that. But
I think your psychology would change if you made that choice,
psychology change?
like the way you think.
Explain. Not quite sure what you mean.
I'm just.
And we can still keep this on topic with this. I'll let you
I
go
guess
ahead
like if you cross certain intimacy boundaries, your brain will actually rewire itself. It's like, oh, I'm on
Mm-hmm.
step 3 of biology, like born, grow up,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, start reproducing. I don't know, but like whatever levels. This is more of, I guess, a hypothesis than really a boom, I've read neuroscience type deal. But I really wouldn't be surprised if the brain rewired itself. I know there's some thinkers that view it as like a rise in conscientiousness,
Mm-hmm.
like Jordan Peterson. So I don't know if the like, it's difficult to estimate if they did it once and then their church is like, okay, you did it once, welcome back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a hard one to really know if it's even how nature works.
Yeah. I honestly can't comment on that. I'm no scientist, so I can't say much about it. But I guess my next question is, how often do people think either commitment or having feels, quote unquote, will hinder sex? So the idea is, if we get married, will this hinder our sexual relationship? And this is people who have already been engaged in a sexual relationship before they're married. And I'm wondering, the reason why I asked that question is because I'm wondering how many people prolong commitment because they still want to just have fun, or they view marriage as kind of this tie down. But my question is, if you view it as a tie down, why are you, and this is with some assumptions as well on my part, if you view it as a tie down, why are you already living with one another, paying bills with one another? I'm sure you have a pet with one another. You're practically married at that point. You just don't have the paperwork. And some people say, well, you just don't need the paperwork. That's true. But don't you need money, which is a form of paper to pay bills?
It's Yeah, this is one of those issues that's inherently really complicated. I think in the Jewish context, I guess Hebrew. Well, I think they became Jewish after they returned from the Babylonian exile. Before they're Hebrew. In my understanding, and please fix my version of Judaism that's probably pretty random.
You probably know about as much as I do.
I thought there was this thing where, and they had like prearranged marriages ish.
I'm not too familiar with the ancient world.
I think how it worked is the man would go to like the father that had a daughter, and it was like, I would like to marry your daughter, and he would say, okay, work for me for a couple of years, and then build like a house on my land. So he like builds a house, and it's like, okay, you've like mono on mono. You've like proven you're like man enough and that you're really serious. It wasn't like a random capricious like flipping, I want to marry this person. It's like, no, you built the house. Now get married, like, and go into it. And it's very hard to correlate that to modern context of what it looks like building a house. Or it was kind of weird. It was all tied into this coming of age thing, and it was like a lot younger. It was a lot younger than our culture.
Probably because our Western culture doesn't have a rite of passage. Probably, is my guess.
What's a rite of passage?
Rite of passage. Think of, let's say, a bunch of 15-year-old teenagers in some sort of tribe in some sort of far-off country. It's like, okay, you all have to go out and kill a lion. They all go out and kill a lion, bring it back. It's like, okay, you are not all now officially men of the tribe, and you can now go out and hunt. I don't know. Something like that. Or they take... I'm vaguely remembering something. They would take a child away from the mother and subject the child to certain rites and rituals before they would do something. That I'm vaguely remembering.
Yeah, I think the Spartans, the mother would have to like detach from the son, then they would like go do war shenanigans. Well, I guess not shenanigans, they're actually fighting, but like they were like sent to the military complex at some point to be divided from the mother.
Yeah. I can't comment too much on that. I'm no historian. I'm just a guy who likes to read a bit. Yeah, I think going back to the topic of commitment. How many people are willing to commit with the person that they're already sleeping with? I say that just in a general sense, nothing specific. I don't have any facts or data or anything like that.
I don't know. I'm not sure how much to... Like, it's complicated nowadays. Like, contraceptives, sure, that changes things. Just this whole prolonged childhood of going to college, where from the age of, say, 18 to... Let's just say 16 to 24, actually, that you hit sexual maturity, like you're able to start making new humans. There's like just this huge gap, and then, okay, here, have contraceptives, go be confused. Like, I guess it's not a very great cultural system we have in place. Whereas in the Jewish context, if you are a woman in that ancient society and you're not a virgin, you're less valued or something, or you're like kind of shunned.
I'd have to look into that, but it's still interesting.
I guess the systems in the Jewish context like actually like protected the women. Like they're pretty progressive for its time.
Yeah.
I guess it's how do I word this? Marriage is this thing, and then you start to have all these hooks into it. You have this hook of like, oh, it's a legal thing, and then it's a financial thing, and then it it's also gotten very baked into like legislation.
Like for our modern culture, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like I guess it's like, is marriage a natural law? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
natural for people to seek connection, come together, then like form little committed tribe family things,
Yeah.
or is it this like legal political financial identity?
Yeah. Yeah. As a personal opinion, I don't want to get too far into politics, but I don't think government should be involved in marriage in any sort of way. But I think it should be left up to the individual, either the individual religious institution or the people who desire for that sort of thing. But that would depend upon the person. But that's a whole nother issue that I am not, I don't feel like I'm very authoritative to speak on that matter.
And then there's also the I need to have a perfect Instagram wedding or Twitter wedding.
Yeah.
Like there's also this like super high bar on extravagance, because there's not I guess it's not like there's a cultural path of, hey, here's the rituals we do, they're the same for everyone, and then boom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think my guess is this is just observation. I think a lot has been lost in regards to how we view love. But love in regards to passion, from what I see, it seems to be disconnected. And it's just passion without love.
As far as the commitment question you asked, I think there's two different ways to view that. One is, imagine it's like, I don't know, one partner asking another, like, hey, you're committed to me, right? Are you going to be there at my deathbed, or you'll be there at my deathbed, or vice versa, or whatever? That's like one kind of extreme way to view it. It's like, hey, at the end, are we together?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other, I guess, more immediate thing is, hey, do we have the tools and the procedures and the ways to resolve conflict when they arise, and to communicate effectively and to make things work?
Mm-hmm.
Because like those questions aren't unrelated to just say, here's the end goal, like wanting you at my bedside when we die, or being together forever. But then there's also the procedure of getting there. Like, no, you have to have methods of communicating and actually making the relationship self-correcting, and knowing when to give feedback and knowing when to shut your mouth. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that also might be part of the issue. It projects a lot into the future, and then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it fails to account for the immediate procedures and habits that are necessary to get there.
Yeah, for sure. I think. Actually, I don't know what to think. I guess my question is, when do some people try to use sexual desire as a form of not mismanagement, as a form of control? Not, but it it's the word that I'm looking for that goes with control. It starts with an M, I think.
Manipulation.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so I'm wondering, how often do some people use sex as a form of manipulation?
I I can't give you a percentage. I know manipulation is like a universal reality that could occur, and then it's case by case whether that universal reality exists within the particular situation. Uh, yeah, I think part of this just gets to the like BuzzFeed, like what are red flags, type thing. Um, yeah, manipulation. I guess it's like the scorekeeping. Like, hey, you want this? Well, do this for me, and it really keeps score, and then it also kind of has these expectations on the other person, like you should operate within these bounds, and maybe I'll even shrink those bounds a little bit if I get too annoyed by you not doing dishes or whatever.
Yeah.
It becomes kind of conditional. And sometimes manipulation stems from insecurity. It's like wanting to control someone.
I can say for myself, personally, sex is not a way somebody can manipulate me. I know there's that whole stereotype of, oh, if you don't do this for me, then no sex for you. I'm gonna be like, well, I guess we're just not gonna have sex for a while.
Yeah, that's toxic. That's a sexual hostage situation.
Yeah. Yes. See, it's like me as a guy. I do enjoy sex, but at the same time, if you're gonna try to hang that over my head, I'm like, well, I've got other things I can do. Obviously, pornography is not one of those things. I think pornography is increased sexual toxicity within the culture, both for men and women. But, it's like, well, we're not going to have sex. I'm just going to go to the gym then. Forget you.
Yeah, I think that would be like toxic femininity to
Probably.
like little 8-year-olds, they like to wrestle. I don't know why. It's important to them. And older guys after puberty, they want to have sex. It's important to them. I don't know why.
Sounds like a Freudian theory you're coming up with right now.
No, oh, please, no. Please don't. I'm just saying that there's some things that just happen and they're biological and they're just kind of a mystery. But there's this level of reverence of, oh, it's just important for this person's nature. Whether guy understands girl understands guy, who knows, but...
Yeah. Here's a fun question for somebody out there who might be able to answer it. I'm wondering if there's been a guy who's used sex as a means to hold a woman hostage in that manner. Like, oh, babe, since you didn't do this for me, we're not going to have sex. I don't know. You don't have to answer it because I don't have a clear answer. It's just a question that I figured somebody out there might know. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure it exists. Yeah, I'll say that much.
Yeah. So,
okay, there's this other claim in C.S. Lewis's book that Eros obliterates the line between giving and receiving. That this perfect, desire for connection and passion that's correctly integrated with the individual, it kind of blurs the line between two human souls of giving and receiving, and it's kind of just this free flow economy between two humans with no barrier.
Yeah, going back to that thing that I mentioned earlier, sex should be about mutual pleasure for one another. It shouldn't be just all the guy getting the pleasure or all the woman getting the pleasure. It should be something that you're both willing to give to one another. Because for myself, this is somewhat personal, but it's still not taboo for me. My last relationship, unfortunately, it never seemed like my ex was able to come to that conclusion about, oh, I'm I want to give him fulfillment and he can give me fulfillment. No, it's sometimes I think she saw it as, well, I'm just going to do this just so I can get it done. And I don't think that's a healthy way of doing it. Like I mentioned, she had other personal issues with her. And I will say this, a very, very selfish person. Actually, that's a good topic for that. If you're a selfish person who doesn't know how to give and take in that manner, sex is going to be a very difficult thing for you. And if let's say you're a selfish guy who just likes to receive pleasure, sure, you might feel good, but you're not going to get that real intimacy. And a woman who's probably selfish in that manner as well probably won't receive that proper sexual gratification in that manner. At least that's what I've noticed with my own personal life. For me, sex is very much about the giving of each other for mutual beneficial pleasure.
Yeah, I agree that would be the version of it that leads to wholeness and like an integrated person. And yeah, it does contrast what C.S. Lewis's quote is, that perfect Eros is perfect passion, connection, version of love. Giving and receiving is not really a thing. But yeah, if you go into a sexual encounter expecting to take or expecting to receive, then you already see the breakdown of his quote.
Yeah, take actually would be a better word to use instead of the way you said it. Take just sounds like, well, this is just mine. While when you say, well, I'd like to receive this, it sounds more like you're receiving a good gift from somebody. But I think I get what you're saying, though, regardless.
Yeah, just the breakdown of his idea into what you're describing, which, yes, is not like a full, like the fullness of proper Eros.
Yeah. And I think as well, a good question for some people might be, this would be if anybody listens to this, if you're being selfish with your sexuality towards your spouse, how can you be less selfish towards them in that regards? Or if you're somebody who's just like, oh, I just want to get this done and over with, why is that? Why do you want to just get it done and over with? Is there a lack of, I guess, foreplay or what have you? I will say this, for me, there is no lack of foreplay. I greatly enjoy a lot of the other things that come with the bedroom, not just penetration, but a lot of the other things.
Okay, I'll just go there.
Yeah, go ahead. Like I said, for me, this is not a taboo subject for me.
If foreplay is let's say it's connected to the play instinct, it serves a different function than typical play, but it is a version of play, then I think it has to inherently relate to personalities. That, how do I word this? The person who's like a musician or an artist or is able to extend their personality to certain mediums, in a relationship, you'd be able to see, I guess, their personality through it, rather than just pleasure. Like there's, how do I word this? Okay, this is a tangent. I was in my lobby earlier.
Go for it.
I was in my lobby earlier and I'm like whistling hymns and like getting mail or something. And this basically granny, she like kind of, I'm passing her with my mail and she says, "Oh, my bird really likes your whistling."
Oh.
And I'm like, "What?" And she literally has like a cage with a bird, I guess.
Oh, that's funny.
I guess she like took it for a walk or something. and I'm whistling, and I just see this bird like head bobbing, and then I stop, and then it stops, and then I start like a clapping thing, and it starts dancing too. And I was just thinking about the animal kingdom, that there's birds that dance to attract a mate, and they show off colorful feathers,
Mm-hmm.
or do all sorts of ridiculous things. And there is some amount of personality baked into that. It was weird that I was clapping and the bird was like giving this rhythm, and that's probably the closest thing it had to fulfilling its nature.
Yeah.
But like it, yeah. So I guess there's like dance and music and ritual, and dance and music is deeply connected to personality, and it's deeply connected to sex,
Mm-hmm.
and it's deeply connected to the desire for connection, which is, using Rob Bell, is like the healthy goal of it.
Mm-hmm. That is a good point.
So to strip any form of play out of it is definitely missing that
Mm-hmm.
deeply biological associations.
Yeah. And I suppose relating it as well. I know I've got quote unquote relationship trauma, even though I don't consider it trauma. Although considering what happened, oh well, that's neither here nor there. I have this theory right now of, do selfish people not know how to have good sex, while people who are selfless, although it can depend on the person, I suppose. I suppose a good way of putting it is, people with a personality with more depth, are they better at sex versus somebody who is about as shallow as a glass of water? Does that make sense? Or
My intuition would say yes.
I feel like there's a but there.
Like I haven't been like a therapist for like 20 years or something, so I can't say I've lifted up this object into the light and looked at it at all sides.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have a wide enough base to really make that claim, but my intuition says yes, that if it's saturated with like compassion and care for the other person and personality and life and like this life force, it would be better and more meaningful and more fulfilling.
Yeah, I think at least for instinct wise, we don't have the facts and figures in front of us. But I think a good way as well is, Eros is not just about satisfying your own desires, but the desires of the person you are with. And I think that's a good way of describing what we've been talking about.
I'm going to make another cross reference to Rob Bell.
No, you're fine.
He has this chapter called Animals and Angels,
Mm-hmm.
and it's trying to place the role of sexuality within the human experience. And you could see people that are like, oh, we're just like animals. Animals have sex, blah, blah. But like, this is so boring to talk about because it's really saying nothing new. But there are people that just reduce it to the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, he calls like this other air of being, trying to be like way too angelic to the point that you deny like the reality of having a body. He uses an example of someone, I guess he's like giving counseling to, who had a family that never like did hugs or high fives or anything physical, and they're kind of just deeply affected by that in their unconscious, that they have to be like really pure, and it led to this like detachment in the person. Like to be an angel is to not know what it's like to have a body, to be embodied. It's just a floating spirit without embodiment. But to say you're just like animals would be to deny the reality of having the knowledge of good and evil and understanding the higher forms. So yeah, Rob Bell likes to place us between those two.
Okay. That's interesting to me. I haven't read the book, but sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's an idea. I'll say that. Everyone's an adult; they can make up their own mind about it.
Oh yeah, and here's a quote from page 127. I wrote it down. You were talking about play earlier, and this actually hits the nail on the head. Banish play and laughter from the bed of love, and you may let in a false goddess.
Boom. C.S. Lewis agrees.
So it's basically, if you don't have a lot of foreplay, if you don't have a lot of fun in the bedroom in that manner, you let in a false pleasure. It's a good way of putting it. Now, mind you, I'm not one for BDSM. I think this is my own personal opinion. I'll let other people deal with their own bedroom stuff, but this is just my personal opinion. BDSM is not true love expressed. It's almost like a twisting of pleasures. But like I said, that's just my personal opinion. It's just not appealing to me. It's just, I'm not one for the handcuffs, not for the whips, not for the gag balls. I am not one. Like I said, this is not taboo for me. I am willing to talk about this. Till the sun sets, which the sun set a while ago. See, I'm willing to get very graphic and detailed without it being awkward for me. As you can tell, I am not prude. I'm only prude if I'm not married.
Oh man. There's also C.S. Lewis, he's talking about why marriages run into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And his claim is that it's very rarely related to sensuality. It's much more often related to, how do I say this word? Avarice?
Avarice?
Yeah. He says that's more likely the issue in a marriage not working than sensuality.
I'm looking it up right now to get a proper definition, but continue.
Yeah, the Cory definition, which Jordan's about to fact check in like a second. Avarice being, differences in how you treat money, how much is enough. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the Webster is greed or
excessive or insatiable desire for wealth or gain. So it could be avarice, could be an excessive desire for anything. So
monetary, how big your house is.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess in a relationship not having the when is enough, this is enough conversation, and maybe one partner just pursuing their kind of own empire
at the peril of the other person.
Yeah, either peril or just not seeing at eye level with each other. Or of one person just chasing their perhaps career and just destroying their family life, or
a level of lack of self-awareness. Is another good thing to put into perspective.
Yeah, and I guess it does kind of come to a lack of, self-awareness due to not having mutual priorities.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, whoa, honey, I didn't think this is what we were about. Like, seriously, we're buying this $150,000 car. Like this is over the top.
Or buying a $150 dress when you have 10 already in the closet. that's a personal thing.
Yeah.
I actually don't mind talking about my personal issues. What? You're kind of giving me that look like you.
No, it's just one of those being careful about things you post on the internet,
Oh,
etc., etc.,
for
etc.
me, I as long as I'm not giving out my home address, I'm fine with talking about stuff about my personal life.
Okay. What else? Oh, here's an interesting. This is just an idea that C.S. Lewis brings up. He rambles a lot in this chapter. My goodness.
Yeah, I think he had a lot more. He seemed to be better in this chapter though than he did in Friendship, though. Is what I think he did better with this chapter.
That's true. Okay, he has this point that during sex, partners are playing the roles of things that are much older and less personal in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're like embodying this universal masculinity and femininity. And as we know, the masculine and the feminine are in dialogue until the end of time. It's really interesting too, because we watch these Disney movies where Cinderella falls in love, like, oh, it's great.
Yeah.
And part of that just strums the right chords in our hearts. Like, we know about this thing. We know about people falling in love and making families. And we don't even have to be part of it. We could just love the whole situation, love the whole process, love the whole, like, occurrence and cycle of it, even if we're not in it. So his idea that man and women are embodying this universal form of the masculine and feminine in dialogue in their encounters is super interesting to me from a Jungian perspective.
Yeah. I think here's a good quote from Lewis as well, page 142. The real danger seems to me that let me start over. The real danger seems to me not that the lovers will idolize each other, but that they will idolize Eros himself. Mm-hmm. So I understand he's not meaning idolize in the sinful sense, but more of they won't love each other for their own sake, but rather they'll just love each other for some other shallow reason, I guess is a good way of putting it. Does that make sense? Or they'll idolize an ideal version of what the love should be, but as a matter of fact, that love is not met.
Yeah, like it is a created thing. When I was talking about sex as taking on the universals and like embodying them for a short time, it is very interesting to partake in this great mystery of life of reproduction. Like it's this great mystery shrouded in ritual and dance and courting and play and all these things. It's a mystery, but it also is a created thing. Like it's a created mystery. So yeah, when you try to put that created thing on the top of the pyramid, it will be a false god and devolve into a demon, to use C.S. Lewis's heuristic.
That's a good way of putting it. I think that here's a good last point to end on for Lewis. In regards to that quote that was just mentioned on page 146, Eros is driven to promise what Eros of himself cannot perform. So it's basically love is driven to what love cannot attain. So basically, you're putting unrealistic expectations on a thing. Don't have your expectations so platonic that it's unreachable.
Yeah, I think it's like the preferred analogy, like for desire and connection, which eventually turns into desire and connection with with the Godhead and partaking in the divine nature,
Mm-hmm.
just to throw some orthodoxy in there. Yeah, I think to just substitute the preferred analogy for the thing itself, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to lead to wholeness.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to end on there. Or unless do you have more to add?
No, it's just one of those mysteries of life, and shrouded in all sorts of interesting things: play, courting, dance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Uh,
I think as long as you if you find a good woman, she'll treat you well. And if I find a good woman, she'll treat me well, considering how we both are. Oh well. Anyway, I got nothing else.
all right, see you, dude.